Before we dive in, if you love dark, twisted true crime stories that make your heart pound and your palms sweat, hit subscribe, like, and comment, because this is one story you won't forget. And trust me, the deeper we go, the darker it gets. At 3:17 a.m., the silence over the sprawling hills outside San Salvador was broken by the low hum of armored vehicles. A convoy of military trucks rumbled along the gravel road, their headlights slicing through the fog that clung to the valley like a shroud. Inside, officers whispered in clipped tones, checking their gear for the 100th time. Each one knew that beyond the reinforced gates of Cecot Prison, the world's most violent gang members were waiting. And these weren't men you bargained with. They were monsters in human skin. Cecot Prison was a fortress built not just to contain criminals, but to contain chaos itself. Concrete walls topped with razor, wires stretched higher than most city buildings. Watchtowers bristled with armed guards, their spotlights scanning the compound for the slightest hint of movement. The facility was designed to hold thousands of inmates, but intelligence reports suggested it housed the core leaders of every major gang in El Salvador, from MS-13 to Barrio 18, all under one roof. Lieutenant Marco Herrera, a 42-year-old veteran of El Salvador's National Police, was at the head of the convoy. His face was hard, carved from years of chasing killers and surviving ambushes. He had seen death up close, and yet nothing had prepared him for Cecot. "This place doesn't just hold criminals," he muttered, checking his Glock. "It breeds them." The team's mission tonight was surgical. Intelligence had uncovered a smuggling operation inside the prison, a hidden network trafficking drugs, weapons, and, most disturbingly, information. But as the convoy reached the main gate, Herrera noticed something off. The guards were tense, their radios crackling with chatter that didn't match any standard protocol. Inside the prison, the night air reeked of sweat, smoke, and fear. Hallways twisted like the veins of a living creature, each turn potentially hiding a knife or worse. Cells were stacked in brutalist towers, each one a microcosm of violence. Prisoners shouted over the din, voices hoarse from hatred, pain, and boredom turned lethal. The operation began quietly. Officers moved in, checking cell by cell. In one corner, a young inmate, barely 19, cowered against the wall. His eyes darted like a trapped animal's, and when Herrera spoke, he trembled. "Where is it?" Herrera demanded. "The shipment. Who's running it?" The boy's lips quivered, but he refused to answer. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Chaos erupted. Shouts turned into screams. Metal doors slammed, echoing through the facility like cannon fire. Guards scrambled, tried to regain control, but the prisoners had anticipated this move. Somewhere in the dark, a fight broke out, and the unmistakable sound of gunfire shattered the night. Herrera's team radioed for backup. "Contain them! Contain them now!" he barked, but he already knew containment was impossible. The prison's architecture was a maze, designed by those who had once been prisoners themselves. Each corridor, each stairwell, each dead end was a calculated trap. Hours later, when the lights finally returned, the full scale of the chaos became clear. Several guards were injured, 2 officers were missing, and the smuggling operation had vanished as if it had never existed. But in one cell block, something peculiar drew Herrera's attention. A wall scratched with names, dates, and cryptic symbols. Most were gang members' monikers, but one name stood out: Isabella Reyes. Isabella was missing. Her disappearance had already been reported to the police 2 weeks earlier. She wasn't a gang member, not exactly. She was a journalist who had been investigating the inner workings of El Salvador's gangs, digging for a story that could make or break her career. Now, her name carved into a cell wall, next to cryptic numbers and letters, sent a chill down Herrera's spine. "Why would she be here?" he whispered, tracing the symbols with a gloved hand. The scratches weren't recent. They were months old. Whoever had carved them knew the prison intimately, knew the hidden corners where nobody went, where the dead could vanish without a trace. Herrera's instinct screamed that this was more than a smuggling operation. This was a signal, a breadcrumb left for someone who knew exactly how to read it. His gut told him Isabella had gotten too close to something dangerous, something the gangs couldn't allow anyone to expose. And now, that danger had arrived inside Cecot's walls. By morning, the prison was back under control, but the sense of unease lingered like smoke in the hallways. Officers combed every corner, but there were no traces of the missing journalists, and the smuggling network remained ghostly, invisible, untouchable. Every officer knew that once someone went inside Cecot, once they became part of its ecosystem, they either adapted or disappeared. And then came the message. It was left on Herrera's desk and signed, typed on an old typewriter. Only 5 words. She's closer than you think. It was a warning, but it was also a challenge. Whoever had written it knew him personally. Someone inside the prison, someone who wanted him to fail, was orchestrating this chaos. And the deeper he dug, the more he realized that Cecot was not just a prison. It was a theater of war, and he was standing on the front lines. But the biggest shock came later that afternoon. While inspecting a service corridor that ran beneath the prison's administrative block, Herrera stumbled upon a hidden door, obscured by a stack of cleaning supplies. It was locked, and the keyhole was unusual, more sophisticated than anything he'd ever seen in a public facility. Adrenaline surged through him as he forced it open, expecting weapons contraband, maybe even a hidden cell. What he found instead made him stagger back, heart-hammering. Inside the dimly lit room, photographs of prisoners, guards, and city officials were pinned to the wall in a chaotic collage. Strings connected faces, like a twisted web. And at the center of it all, a recent photograph of Isabella Riz, her eyes wide with terror, as if she had just realized something terrible. Herrera felt the weight of the room crush him. This wasn't just about gangs or smuggling. This was a plan, a strategy, and he was now inside it, whether he wanted to be or not. As he stepped back, the door clicked shut behind him. He tried to open it, but it was locked from the outside. And then, faint but unmistakable, a voice whispered from the darkness. Lieutenant Herrera, welcome to Cecot. The room went silent, but the fear remained thick and suffocating. Something told him that whatever was inside that prison, whatever had claimed Isabella, was far from finished. And just like that, the investigation turned personal. Lieutenant Herrera's pulse still thundered in his ears as he pounded on the locked door, but there was no answer. The darkness pressing on all sides, the faint light from the corridor barely illuminating the pinned photographs and the tangled web of strings. Each line connected a prisoner to a guard, a gang member to a politician, a deal that had been made in whispers and shadows. And at the center, Isabella Riz, like a blinking beacon warning of something catastrophic. He forced the door again, harder this time. Nothing. It was as if the room itself had swallowed him whole. The whispers of the prison seemed to grow louder, the clanging of distant gates and the shouts of inmates echoing through the empty hallways, forming a sinister symphony. Every instinct in Herrera screamed that someone inside the prison was watching. Back in the command center, officers had begun combing surveillance footage. Every camera in the prison was either off or showing static. That wasn't an accident. It was a coordinated blackout. Someone with inside knowledge had orchestrated it all, and the sophistication of the operation was chilling. This wasn't just gang activity. This was a network operating with military precision. Hours later, Herrera finally broke the door open by prying it with a fire extinguisher. Inside, he discovered a hidden tunnel that descended beneath the prison's foundations. It smelled of damp concrete and rot, but what caught his attention was a meticulous construction. Reinforced walls, steel beams, and ventilation systems. This wasn't an escape route. This was a command center. Someone had been planning here for months, maybe years, and the goal was clear. Total control of Cecot. As he moved cautiously down the tunnel, Herrera's flashlight revealed a small room at the end. Inside, monitors displayed live feeds of every major section of the prison, cells, corridors, even the guards' barracks. Names and numbers were scrawled in black marker next to each feed. And then one monitor flickered, revealing a hooded figure, male, muscular, tattooed from neck to wrist, watching the screens like a predator studying its prey. Herrera's radio crackled, and the voice of Captain Luis Medina cut through. "Lieutenant, we've identified gang activity in Block 7. Multiple weapons reported. You need to get out now." Ignoring the warning, Herrera stepped closer to the screens. One image froze. Isabella Reyes alive but terrified, blindfolded in an isolated wing of the prison. And then, the strangest thing happened. The hooded figure turned toward the camera, and a tattoo on his forearm, an intricate spider web, glinted under the light. Herrera's stomach sank. That symbol was notorious. It belonged to El Coyote, a gang leader who had been presumed dead after a bloody prison riot 2 years earlier. El Coyote alive? Herrera muttered under his breath, feeling the weight of the revelation. If he was in Cecot, controlling movements from the shadows, nothing would ever be straightforward again. Every alliance inside the prison was suspect. Every prisoner a potential enemy. Outside, the prison had descended into chaos again. Reports of stabbings and fires came in one after another. A prisoner named Julio El Rastro, Mendoza, had disappeared from his cell. Guards found smeared blood leading to dead-end corridors, as if someone wanted them to follow and fail. Whoever was orchestrating this had learned Herrera's patterns, and was always one step ahead. Herrera knew he needed allies inside. He contacted Lieutenant Ana Cruz, a veteran negotiator known for extracting information from the most hardened criminals. She had a reputation for reading minds, not just faces. Together, they began piecing together the network of prisoners, guards, and civilians involved in the operation. And the deeper they dug, the more shocking the connections became. One of the prison's own wardens, a man named Ricardo Torres, was complicit, feeding El Coyote information about every raid, every transfer, every investigator's move. Ana and Herrera confronted Torres in his office. He was sweating, a thin veneer of professionalism cracking as they entered. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he stammered. But Herrera held up the photographs in the hidden room. The spider-web tattoos, gang symbols, dates of planned violence. Torres paled. "They know you're here," Ana said flatly. "They know you're watching. Every move you make, they've anticipated it." Torres swallowed hard. "You don't understand. Cecot, it's bigger than gangs. Bigger than the state. El Coyote, he's organizing something that will change everything. You can't stop it from the outside." Before Herrera could respond, the alarms in the prison blared again. Shouts erupted from Block 9. A new riot had started, and through the thick smoke and screaming, Herrera caught sight of a figure moving with unnatural speed. El Coyote himself, leading inmates with military-like precision. And in the chaos, a group of masked men disappeared down a maintenance corridor. Among them, Herrera could swear he glimpsed Isabella. The lieutenant and Ana followed, pushing through smoke, blood, and the cries of prisoners. Every step felt like walking deeper into a trap. And then, as they turned a corner, Herrera saw it. A door reinforced, with scratch marks forming the same cryptic symbols from the first room. Someone had been expecting him. Ana whispered, "This is it. Whoever's inside is counting on us to come here." Herrera's hand hovered over the lock. He had a choice: wait for backup, or go in alone and face the unknown. Every instinct screamed danger, but every second mattered. Isabella's life depended on him acting fast. With a deep breath, Herrera forced the door open. Inside was a small chamber, bare except for a single chair in the center. And tied to that chair, blindfolded and bruised, was Isabella Reyes. Her lips moved silently, as if she were speaking to someone else. And then she looked up at him, eyes wide, and whispered one word: "Trust." Before Herrera could react, the door slammed shut behind him, and from the darkness, a voice echoed, low, chilling, unmistakable. "Lieutenant Herrera, welcome to the true heart of Cecot." The chamber was suffocating. Herrera's chest heaved as he took in the sight of Isabella, tied to a chair, her blindfold soaked with sweat and tears. The walls were bare concrete, the only light a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling. And from the shadows, the unmistakable figure of El Coyote emerged, his spiderweb tattoos visible even in the low light, his movements smooth, deliberate, predatory. "You've come far, Lieutenant," he said, voice calm, almost cordial. "But you're still too late. This place, Cecot, it's bigger than you, bigger than the state, bigger than anyone can imagine." Herrera gritted his teeth. "Release her. Now." El Coyote laughed, a low, terrifying sound. "You don't understand. She's the key." He gestured toward Isabella. You see, she's been documenting everything. Every deal, every betrayal, every lie. And what I want is control. Control over information. Control over chaos. Herrera's mind raced. This wasn't just about a journalist or a gang. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to manipulate the prison, and through it, the country. If El Coyote succeeded, Cecot would become untouchable, a fortress not only of flesh and steel, but of fear and corruption. Anna's voice crackled through the radio, barely audible over the thick walls. Lieutenant, you need to stall him. We have backup almost in position, but you have to buy time. Herrera swallowed, weighing his options. One wrong move, and Isabel would be dead. He had trained for high-risk scenarios, but nothing could have prepared him for this. El Coyote, Herrera said carefully, you don't know what's coming. The moment you hurt her, every network, every ally you've built will turn on you. The gang leader's grin widened. Bold. But do you really think anyone inside this prison is loyal to anyone but themselves? Cecot doesn't reward loyalty. It rewards survival. Suddenly, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoed from the corridor outside. The backup had arrived. The walls shook as the first wave of officers breached the outer doors. In the panic, El Coyote lunged toward Isabella, but Herrera tackled him, sending both men crashing to the floor. The struggle was brutal. El Coyote was strong, trained, and desperate. Herrera could feel the spiderweb tattoo dig into his skin as they grappled. And just as it seemed the gang leader might overpower him, the chamber door exploded inward. Anna and a team of officers stormed in, guns raised, lights flashing. El Coyote froze, realizing he was cornered. This isn't over, he hissed. But Herrera saw the first crack in his facade. The confident predator was now trapped, exposed. The officers moved quickly, securing El Coyote and freeing Isabella. She collapsed into Herrera's arms, shaking, whispering, I knew they were watching. I just didn't know who. Herrera nodded, holding her steady. You're safe now. We're getting you out. But Cecot wasn't done. As they moved to evacuate, alarms blared again, this time more urgent. Officers shouted. Another breach. Somewhere deeper inside the prison, other leaders were attempting to escape, carrying with them files, weapons, and evidence of unspeakable crimes. Herrera's eyes narrowed. He realized the plan had layers they hadn't anticipated. El Coyote had been the tip of the iceberg, a distraction, a test to see how investigators would respond. And now, other factions inside Cecot were making their move. Split up, Herrera ordered. Contain the exits. Don't let anyone leave alive or with evidence. What followed was chaos. Gunfire erupted in the hallways. Smoke filled the air. Prisoners and officers collided in a deadly ballet of survival. Herrera and Anna moved quickly, cornering key gang lieutenants and intercepting contraband shipments. Every decision was life or death. Finally, as the dust settled, Cecot lay in smoldering silence. El Coyote and his lieutenants were in custody. Isabella was shaken but alive. The prison's darkest corners had been exposed, the hidden tunnels discovered, and the network dismantled, or so it seemed. But the real shock came later that evening. In the evidence room, Herrera and Anna examined the confiscated files from the tunnels. Among them, a folder marked simply, Cecot Files, Phase 2. Herrera opened it, expecting operational details. Instead, he found photographs, guards, politicians, businessmen, and next to each, a note in a handwriting he recognized instantly, Isabella Reyes. Anna gasped. She's been feeding them information all along. Herrera's stomach sank. The journalist they had risked everything to save had been a double agent, embedded deeper than they had ever realized. Every move, every revelation had been anticipated. El Coyote hadn't failed. Someone else had been pulling strings from behind the curtain. Before Herrera could react, his radio crackled one last time. The voice was distorted, mechanical, almost taunting. You think the killer is behind bars, but Cecot isn't done. Phase 2 begins soon. The room went silent. Herrera looked at Isabella, who now smiled faintly, almost coldly, the fear gone from her eyes. It was replaced with something else. Control. She had survived, yes, but at a cost, and with secrets that could destroy anyone in her path. Herrera realized then the truth. Cecot wasn't just a prison. It was a living, breathing entity, and anyone who entered it, even heroes, could become part of its machinery. And as the night fell over the fortress walls, he knew the story wasn't over. Not for him, not for Cecot, and certainly not for Isabella Reyes. The last image lingered in his mind. The spiderweb tattoo, the hidden tunnels, the photograph of her smiling in the darkness. Cecot had claimed another piece of the world. Its heart, its secrets, and now, perhaps, its next puppeteer. They thought the battle was over. But in the shadows of El Salvador's most feared prison, the game had only just begun.